Hey friends, I'd much rather be in the room with you guys, but coronavirus has messed up y'all's school year, and for me, working with students, it's messed up our plans too, and so this is the best we can do. I'm happy to be at least with you on a screen, and so I'm grateful to Professor Powell for inviting me to speak. My name is Cole Harper, and I work with Young Life. I'm in Newberry County, which if you are from around South Carolina, that's like 45 minutes northwest going up I-26 from CIU. If you're not from South Carolina, just know it's a small town about an hour away or less from CIU. So Dr. Powell gave me a list of the questions that he'd like for me to answer, and I've actually gotten the opportunity to share this with his class before, and so I went back through and I looked at some of the things I've said in the past and added some thoughts since the last time I got to answer some of these questions and change some of it. And so you'll get some new material. Normally I like for this to be a discussion, but I realize in this format that can't be the case. So I'm out of my element as well, but I'm going to do my best to give you guys some good stuff. So again, my name's Cole Harper. I'm 25 years old, and I'm the area director for Newberry County Young Life. And I remember not that long ago being where you are in a classroom with other folks who are training for ministry or missions, or maybe just a job in the marketplace where they can know God and make Him known. And it's hard to think that so much time has gone by since I was sitting where you are. So know that the people who are older than you, they aren't lying when they say that it goes quickly. I remember one of my biggest takeaways from this class specifically at CIU was, actually I took this one from Dr. Grant, not Dr. Powell. So one thing that Dr. Powell did give me last time I was with him though was the Growing Young book, which was excellent. It was awesome. It actually inspired me this school year to start a college small group here in our town. And so if you guys get to read that again this year, actually read it. Don't just write a report and flip through it and then throw it on a bookshelf or give it away. It's a great resource. So I remember another assignment I did for this class as well. It was the interview where you had to ask someone who was currently doing what your passion is about what it's like to do that. And so for me, I wanted to do youth ministry. So I talked to the pastor at my church who was over the whole church. He was the youth minister and the campus pastor. And one great piece of advice that he shared with me from that was this one line. He said, "You can only do what you can do, and that's all you can do." And I know that sounds kind of redundant, but that's one thing that stuck with me. So I say all that to make this point. These assignments that you guys have in this class, I know some of them might feel like a hassle, especially now that it's all transitioned online, but if you learn some of the lessons that the assignments and the books and projects are designed to teach you, now they will come in super valuable in your time in ministry or in the marketplace. I wanted to start off by giving a little bit of unsolicited advice. And I know generally that's not a super welcome prospect, but I remember in my time at CIU there being some things that were red flags in my heart and in my life and in the community that I was a part of at CIU. And for those of us that at some point decided to take these things seriously, we grew spiritually through them, we learned, and most of us are still living out our calling. I say this with a heavy heart. There are people who, these things that I'm going to talk about, they never address them, they let them fester, and even some people that lived on my hall, that were in my friend group, are no longer walking with the Lord today. And so, when I give this advice, my desire is for you to hear it with a humble heart, knowing that it can happen to anyone. Like, no one is too good, too holy to suffer unfaithfulness or anything like that. And so here is some unsolicited advice The number one piece of advice that I'd like to give all of you is beware cynicism. Don't be a cynic. It's so easy to become one at CIU, to make fun of chapel or chapel speakers, to go and just drink your coffee and hang out and laugh in class and in chapel, to skip out on church, or to go to a church and sit back and judge the sermon, to judge your professors, and to think, why do they take this so seriously, lighten up, or have a holier than thou mindset. When you become a cynic, what that does is it hardens your heart. And when you have a hard heart, you aren't able to learn things you need to learn. And God is always in the process of trying to teach us something. And so if you have a hard heart, you can't learn those things, and you reject God's design for becoming who you really are. And that's not my desire for any of you. I saw that begin to creep up in my heart when I was at CIU, and when I was made aware of it, I tried to wage war against being a cynic. I knew that if I let myself go down that road, it'd be a lot harder to turn back. And so I started having prayer meetings with some of the guys in my hall, and we would get up every morning at 6 or 6:30 before classes, before breakfast, and we would pray and ask God to help us keep humble hearts. And you might laugh or scoff at that, and I would say, if you do, let that be a red flag in your heart to think that's ridiculous. It's not ridiculous to take these things seriously. And so that's a piece of unsolicited advice. Beware cynicism. Also, I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Power of a Humble Life. And I'm going to talk about a lot of books in a little bit. But one of the things that I read in this book and I wanted to share with you guys is something that I've seen to be really true in church work and ministry. And it's this idea of the things that can take down a leader. Like, if you are in this class, the likelihood is that you are being called to be a spiritual leader to some person or some group or some church or some place. And you need to be aware of these things in order to do that effectively. And so, by the way, this book is by Richard E. Simmons III, if you wanted to look it up. But here's one of the things that he says. He says, pride is particularly destructive to those in high positions of leadership. Several years ago, an article appeared in the Harvard Business Review on why leaders in various business organizations fail. The core data came from a study that revealed that the following 4 primary factors brought about the failures of those senior leaders. So here are the 4 things that brought down these senior leaders. Number 1, they were authoritarian. They were controlling, demanding, they didn't listen to others. I would say, if you do not currently have someone who holds you accountable in your life, that is a great practice to start now. So number 1, they were authoritarian. These all start with A's, so they're easy to remember if you're taking notes. Number 2, they're autonomous. They have little accountability, they're aloof or isolated. So the first one's more of insisting on your will regardless of the costs. The second one is not having anyone who checks your power or balances you out, who has the ability to call you out or to give input whenever they see fit, to criticize you as well as to praise you. So authoritarian, autonomous. Number 3 was adultery. I say this with a hurting heart because I've seen this happen so many times in the ministry world. Lust and the power of sin has taken far too many ministers of the gospel out of play. I'm reminded of the verse, it's in Genesis 4:7, and it's where God tells Cain to watch out for sin because it desires to rule over you, and you must learn to master it. Very few people wake up and decide that day to cheat on their wife. Most of those people find themselves in places where they never intended to be. And I would encourage you, go ahead and put the boundaries in place. Get software in your technology that reports your internet usage to a friend or an accountability partner. avoid places where you know that you will be tempted sexually. Sexual temptation has taken out far too many ministers of the gospel. So I'll move on. The first one was authoritarian. The second one was autonomous. The third one was adultery. And the fourth one was arrogance. Arrogance is pride to the extreme. It's a belief that you are capable. And I was talking about this with a friend the other day. And he said, I would never do that. And I told him gently but in love, I said, that concerns me that you would say that, because generally the people who end up doing the thing that we were talking about are the ones who think that it will never happen to them. And so part of being humble and setting those boundaries and inviting accountability is realizing that you are one decision away from being way down a path that you never intended to be. So keep those guardrails in your life. The Lord and your professor and myself and your friends and everyone you're going to minister to are all rooting for you to succeed spiritually, but sin and the enemy want to stop you. And so God has given you the tools to do those things. So I know none of that was what Dr. Powell has invited me to share on, but as someone who's been where you are now and who's in the ministry now, my desire is that you would also be expanding the kingdom of God, and I just don't want any of those things to stop you from doing that. So let me see what I have next for you. Here's a great principle in all of this. I'm gonna talk specifics in a second, but a great principle in all of this is, are you living the life that you're inviting others into? So for example, if you are training to be a minister right now, then hopefully you are ministering to people. It is an absolute lie that you do not have the time or you do not have the opportunities. Now is as good a time as any to really invest yourself for the rest of your college career in ministering to people if you are not already. And so are you living the life you're inviting others into? That refers to your spiritual life, but we know that that's not a different part of life. Like, your whole life is spiritual. So you can change a bunch of things out in that. Are you eating the way that you want people who follow you to eat? Are you sleeping the way that you want people who follow you to sleep? Do you watch the sort of things that you want people who follow you to watch? All of those things are worth investigating. Do you control your emotions the same way that you would want them to control their emotions? Do you use your finances in ways that you would want them to use their finances? So the principle there, are you living the life that you're inviting others into? And you've got to learn your rhythm also. It's a great piece of advice that Dr. Olshine gave me. We went out to lunch before I graduated. I asked him to give me one piece of advice, and he said, learn your rhythm. So have days of solitude scheduled. Take retreats. Practice the Sabbath. You will run yourself dry if you go into this mission-minded and not caring for your own soul. And so I know that Dr. Powell does a great job of talking about caring for your own soul, because he has had to do that a lot in his life. And so you guys benefit from him in that. So a little bit about my history. So I went to CIU, and while I was at CIU, I became a Young Life leader. I went to high school here in Columbia, and so when I went to college, I just became a Young Life leader in the same area that I went to high school. And Young Life was actually the thing that convinced me that I wanted to go to CIU to study youth ministry and to do that with the rest of my life. And so I graduated, and I had started dating a girl from church. Her name's Tori. She's my wife now. She's in another room working on her stuff today. And we moved out to Newberry, and there's a whole story about how God's hand was in all of that. And maybe if at the end, if I have time, I'll share it. But I applied for Young Life staff. We were engaged at the time. They called me. They asked if we would move to Newberry County and start ministry at a school in Prosperity, South Carolina. And so that's the high school where we lead Young Life now, and I direct the whole area. So I'm over the whole county, but I specifically do ministry at one high school. Yeah, so that's me. Our area has 2 high school clubs. There's only 2 public high schools here. We're trying to start Wildlife, which is the middle school arm of Young Life right now. and we also this year started a group for college students, which I mentioned earlier. That was prompted by my reading Growing Young. So you might be wondering, what is Young Life? Maybe some of you are familiar with it and maybe some of you aren't. I'm actually wearing a Young Life t-shirt, which is one of the perks of doing this from home. It's got a picture of the founder, Jim Rayburn, and the current president, Newt Crenshaw. Young Life is an international nonprofit. It's been around since 1941, and the whole time it's had the same mission, and that is to introduce adolescents to Jesus Christ and help them grow in their faith. So it started in Texas, and now it's in 104 countries. Every state in the U.S. has Young Life, and what we do is we recruit and train adults who love Jesus and care about kids, and we teach them how to go where kids are. So show up at the sports games, show up at the orchestra concert, just show up in their world, build meaningful relationships with them there, and then use those relationships to share the gospel. So we do have weekly events. We have a weekly club, which we call Party with a Purpose, and that is designed to bring in kids that might never step foot in a church building. And we have a weekly Bible study called Campaigners, where we equip the students at the school who are believers and who are following Christ and who want to see their friends respond to the gospel. We equip them with the tools they need to minister effectively to their peers. And we also take camp trips every year. Young Life does camping excellently. And so that's just a little bit about Young Life. You're welcome, as I'm talking, even if you want to pull up on your phone more about Young Life if you're interested. I would take questions, but can't do that. So let's launch into some of these questions. Here's a question. It's number 4. I don't know if you guys have the list. It says this: most of the students in class are thinking of church staff work. What counsel would you give future pastors and their associate staff about relating to and cooperating with parachurch organizations in their geographical area? How can churches partner with parachurch leaders instead of viewing them as a threat? So these questions, they're really asking about the relationship between local churches and parachurch ministries. And what a parachurch ministry is, it's a ministry outside of the church. So the people who do it are part of the church, capital C, but it itself is not a church. It's not a local congregation. So this is asking about the relationship there. I would say we're accomplishing the same mission. The church, their mission is to reach and teach people, to reach people with the gospel and to teach them how to grow in their faith, to teach them how to make disciples. Young Life has the same mission, to introduce adolescents to Jesus Christ and help them grow in their faith. So we have the same mission. We have different strengths. There are things that Young Life does really well that I haven't seen churches historically do as well, and there's things that churches do well that Young Life will never even attempt because it's not a church. And so one of those things, for example, like Young Life camps are par excellence. There's no better retreat center or youth camp that I've ever been to or seen that has even compared with Young Life camp.